This is episode 140 of the Puddcast. I thought I would add a little intro here for everyone because it's been a few months again. Last episode, we reflected, Trifina and I, on some things I learned on sabbatical with my family. It's now been a year since we left on sabbatical, which is wild to me that we've been home already 6 months. And since I spoke with you all last time here, there's been some updates. So last episode we recorded in October, just a few weeks before I started full-time work again. So I am back in IT, which is something I did 15 years ago and was not something I really anticipated getting back into. But things went a direction that we didn't anticipate, and I ended up getting a job as an IT manager at a nearby appliance manufacturing company. And guess what? It's awesome. I love it. I'm enjoying it so much. I tell you what, I miss the flexibility of my time to be able to offer podcasts and more Instagram content and things like that. I miss connecting with many of you more regularly, but I'm really happy. I'm really enjoying being back in IT and solving technical problems and just having a bit more consistent income and being able to support my family that way. And I tell you, it does make these conversations so much more special when they happen. So I really do intend to keep putting stuff out there for you, but at this point, it's just kind of when it happens, it happens. So I am so excited to share this episode with you. Before we get there, I just want to let you know I was on a really great podcast recently with Tara Boothby. She is a Canadian psychologist, and we talk all about the psychology of God, the psychological impact God has on us. We wax quite philosophical about what it means to be here on this earth in these fragile forms, especially in this current moment where things are scary and unstable, and maybe we feel like that we've actually lost trust in institutions, in leaders, in things we could take for granted about the way our country is related to one another. It's a scary, unstable time. And so we reflect on maybe what we should be doing in scary, unstable times. And I know for me, it really just means holding my family close and caring for them and equipping them to love people well. So if you want to go have a listen to that podcast, I'll put it in the show notes, and check out Sojourn Psychology Podcast with Tara Boothby. She's got some other wonderful guests on, and a lot of folks that you may have heard on this show, she has had on her show. She's a lot of fun. So, book news. I'm in the final stages of You Are Enough Teen Edition. It's been with readers for a few months, and I am just about to get back into the final round of editing for that once I've got my feedback from everybody. And then in the next little while, keep an eye out, 2025, for You Are Enough Teen Edition. I'm very excited for that to happen. So here we are, episode 140. And we are talking all about the Book of Belonging. This is a delightful new story Bible from Mariko Clark and Rachel Eleanor. And I've been following them on socials for a few years now. And this book, if you're not on video, it's just a absolutely exquisite, beautiful children's story Bible that is really representational, full of brown-skinned Jews, and Jesus doesn't have blonde hair and blue eyes, and it's full of stories about girls and boys too. But anyway, there's so much that's really great here. I had been longing to have this conversation with Mariko and Rachel for a really long time, and then we had to reschedule it a few times, but finally got it recorded, and it's been in the can waiting for me to have time to edit it. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy another vulnerable, intimate conversation around the importance of representation in Scripture, seeing ourselves, especially for females and young females, in the Bible, and knowing that God loves all of us. I know that sounds simple, but Just wait for the first few stories in this and you'll understand what I'm getting at. All right, friends, check the show notes for all the links to everything. And here we go. Welcome back to the podcast with, 4 people. This is so exciting. I love when it's more than 3. It's like just the matrix of interconnection is that much more. So a big welcome, of course, to Trifina. Thank you for being here with me once again tonight, wrangling the children and allowing you to be in the cedar boxed room.
I'm excited to be back.
And huge welcome to Mariko and Rachel.
Yay. Thank you. We're so thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much.
I have been following the two of you and the work around the Book of Belonging since, I think, early Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite remember exactly when we all crossed paths, but I remember looking at the Kickstarter, because I was like, there's no good Canadian postage rates, and I was all up in your space. But I was like, hot damn, I love the sound of this. I stalked through all of your posts, and I was like, oh, I really like these people. And then, a Kickstarter turns into a whole publishing thing, and now it's 2-3 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, we would love to interview you sometime. Turns somehow into reality at the end of 2024.
I know. Can you believe that it's been so long? When I think about that, I'm like, really? It feels like just yesterday I was DMing you and meeting Rachel for the first time, or even just introducing this concept to the internet. And yeah, I just it's wild to me that it's 2024 already and that it exists in the world and we're talking about it.
And not only does it exist, it is gorgeous.
Thank you.
I expected it to be good. And honestly, I think for so many of us, the bar is so low.
It is, sadly. Yep.
Just have some women in it. I mean, if they're of color, that's fantastic. That's we're really shooting for the moon now. If the theology isn't poisonous, we're used to so many disclaimers, and my refrain was so often now with my children when they're like, "That sounds weird." I'm like, "Yeah, it does." so where does that sit in your body? Tell me about that feeling of weirdness. And it's amazing. The kids are like, so why did God drown all the babies? That just doesn't square with who I know God to be. And I'm like, bingo.
Pay attention.
So what I want you, child, teenager of mine, to do is always listen to that feeling of it doesn't square.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just pull that thread forever.
Mm-hmm.
So all that to say, I was like, okay, great. We're hitting all these good notes. And then I actually saw the finished product and I was overcome by the beauty of it.
Rachel.
That is me.
That's Rachel.
But thank you so much.
It is absolutely stunning. It's a book you can use as a coffee table book, but also, so it's aesthetically pleasing to me, and the children loved the imagery. I was telling Rachel earlier, the fact that there was just a naked baby bum in it was amazing. It made everybody's day. But yeah, sorry, it was absolutely, it is absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, y'all, thank you. That means so much to me. We might talk about this later, but beautiful project, beautiful process, very difficult time in my life, and probably the most challenging creative project I've taken on, where I felt very far from my intuition at times. So I had to rely on Marty and just this guiding feeling I had sometimes. And I was like, I can't tell if this looks good. I'm in the throes of postpartum depression and all sorts of weirdness. I can't tell. So it's lovely to be on the other side. The butts. I felt really strongly about the butts. I'm so glad that they are resonating with readers of all
It's so
ages.
interesting. Yes. Oh, it really is. It's so, first of all, I'm so sorry. It was such a hard season. And we've had the conversations about postpartum depression. It is absolutely no joke, especially when entering parenthood and motherhood. But I find it so interesting when you talk about you not being able to trust your intuition, but creativity was still there was some sort of a guiding force. And the creativity that existed within you still found ways to come out like it feels in the like 2 minutes I've gotten to know you, the imagery feels really authentic to who you are. So it feels really like just profound that even when you felt distant from yourself, what came out of you was still really authentic.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I have been really tender to use some of this language, but the word like feeling led, it definitely happens sometimes. And I think some of that sense of being far from my intuition was more like some of my superpowers just didn't feel like they were working. Like normally I'm like, cool, I can run through a few concepts, feel really confident and get to work. And suddenly I would be spiraling and like just overworking images again and again and again and again. Like huge stuff. There's like images in the book, like the not the nativity scene, the I have good news angel scene. I did like 60 versions of that. I could not tell. And sometimes I would just be going down these strange rabbit holes. And that happened a lot of the time. There's a lot more the voice of the editor during the process for me. And I think that was part of it. I was like in a much darker place. And so it was great to sometimes I'd have to just step back or check in with Mari or let something sit, or I had to say it all the time, finished, not perfect. And sometimes those they just needed to be put in the fridge and come back to. So yeah, it was not the like beautiful flowy process for sure. It felt like just crunching internally sometimes to get stuff out, but like it's still I'm like, wow. Also like I guess like it's like birth, like also being pregnant and having a baby, like not always super comfy, not always super flowy. There is a definite crunch at the end. And something beautiful happens.
I've always found that interplay fascinating between flow, grind, the amount of time, even just in learning your creative art, the amount of intentional time to learn a tool so that you can not think about the tool and just re-enter flow. Mariko, how about you? What was the creative process like on your end?
The creative side of things comes very easily to me, and I think it's because it's sort like this project just felt like the most natural thing in the world because I was already doing it. Like so many parents in 2020 and on, like, my kid's school was shut down. My daughter was doing kindergarten at home. Our churches weren't having services. So I'm all of a sudden her Sunday school teacher and her pastor and her therapist and her spiritual director. And I'm also all of those things for myself. And so I feel like so much of what I did with the book was just this uh this sort of battle out of imposter syndrome that felt all at once really harrowing, but also really welcome. Almost this feeling of like, I'm not prepared for this. Like, surely not me. Like, looking around for the other adult in the room who was going to do the job, realizing that it's me, and then having this feeling of like, oh, but I actually have been doing this. I am equipped for this and it seems to be going okay. Is that really all that's required, is for me to just be the person that I already was and do the thing I was already doing? Is that enough? And just this really reassuring process of kind of like spirit meeting me there and being like, yeah, like all of that, like you Slumdog Millionaired your way here, right? Like all these really bizarre, tiny moments in your life, these things that didn't seem to matter have like qualified you in a way for this situation that like I was already frustrated at the lack of female stories in my kids' Bible. So I was already just telling them from memory, like, hey, there's this woman named Lydia that you haven't heard about. Let me just tell you from my memory. Or like the five daughters of Zelophehad, that became sort of like our banner story. That we've heard, from so many people, and even pastors being like, I literally thought you made this up. Just telling them these stories, or even like as I'm going through their story Bible, sort of like redacting things or changing words. Like I feel like I was already doing that. And then to just be like, oh, I could just pour this into this other thing. And there's all of these people first in these like rippling communities saying like, no, I want that too. Oh, we're already doing that too. Thank God you're like putting it into a book binding, right? Like, I feel like it was just this like labor of just like putting this thing out there that all of us were already doing, already wanted, already needed. And I just like sort of got to be the packager of it. But that sort of continues to be our process. I don't know if you would agree, Rachel, but it's like, I feel like every step of this project has been us being like, here's this thing we made. And then like all of these people being like, no, we already knew and needed, and like, thanks, but like we were already there, and you met us where we were at. It's been this sort of really
We're all hungry. You don't need to
yeah.
convince us.
Yeah,
there's no
exactly. Like, we're
pitch.
trying to exactly, trying to sell this book and be like, hey, have you heard of this thing? And they're like, yeah, no, like, say less. I feel like it's just been this process of people like, yeah, I'm sold, like, just give it to me. And that's not to say like, oh, we did such an amazing thing that people already wanted, but more just like this mystical situation of like the spirit already having been at work in so many different
Yes.
ways for so long that we sort of just like showed up. It's like when someone's cleaning the kitchen and it's like already basically done, and you're like, how can I help at a party? And then they're like, all right, I guess just like put them in the cabinet. It kind of felt like that like Rachel and I showed up and we're like, how can we help? And the spirit was like, I don't know, just like, put it in a hardcover, in the most life-giving way.
That's so cool. That makes perfect sense to me. Our last episode, Trifina and I just were kind of riffing on this idea that God is at work. And if God is a tricky word for you, then just say love is at work. And and it seems to me that love is working. And there's all kinds of scary things in the world there, but there always has been. And uh, it really seems to me that humanity is going somewhere, and it's somewhere good.
Mm-hmm.
And we take 2 steps forward and a couple of steps back, and it's very convoluted, and that's the road. And so I often, I guess the last 3 or 4 years, that's been a similar sense for me, Mariko. What you summarized there is like kind of like, I'm not going to waste any energy convincing anybody of anything. I'm done. I had a decade there, and that's fine. I'm not there anymore. And now it's just like, hey, I make this particular kind of bread, and if you've tapped in that this is the bread you're after, hey, we've got bread, and if it's not for you, it's not for you, but it's really good bread, and suddenly there's all these people who being like, oh my God, give me the bread.
Yeah.
From a mile high view, I just want you both, or either of you, to quickly tell us the genesis. And I think we've already heard a bunch of seeds of it there in terms of raising your children.
Oh, totally.
Give us a little bit more about how the book came to be in the first place, what the book is for anyone who's listening to this who has no idea, and shame on you if that's you. I have been sharing about this book on my socials. So
I'll start. I feel like we've developed a little bit of a cadence here. So the way that came about was 4 years ago. My daughter, who was just starting to read at the time, out of nowhere asked me, Mom, does God love boys more than girls? And I was just taken aback. I'm like, I thought I raised you to be such a good little feminist. Like, where is this question coming from? And she tells me that the story Bible that we have at home that she, had started reading on her own, had only 2 what she called girl stories, and that the rest were boy stories. And so she just, as kids do, drew that sort of black and white opinion from that, which like is like, she's not too far off, like with asking that question. And so I ordered every story Bible I could get my hands on that was on the market at the time. And I went through page by page with my little sticky notes, and I kept a tally of how many stories had a female main character, how many had a female mentioned. And like, when I say mentioned, it's like wife, sister. Like, I wasn't even going for named characters. That would have been a much smaller number. And how many pages
where
had
a female character is talking to another female character,
yeah,
not about a male.
the Bechdel test.
No, Bechdel.
Yeah, that doesn't exist in the Bible. Or no, the five daughters of Zelophehad. They win that for us. And so I went through and I kept my little tally, and then I kept track of how many pages had a female even depicted, like anywhere on the page, even like far back in the crowd. I was just looking for anything, and just, it was bleak. If I have my stats correct, and you would think I'd know them at this point, it was 7% of the stories had a female main character, 19% had a female mentioned, and 23% of the pages had a female depicted anywhere on the page, even in like a huge crowd of people. Just lots of beards. Nothing against beards, Jonathan, but you know what I mean. And so I started thinking, like, after I looked around, it's like no one was doing, like you're talking about the bread, like no one was making the exact kind of bread I wanted. Because then once I started thinking about it, I'm like, well, while I'm looking, I would love if there was a story Bible that had some contemplative practices for my kids. I would love a story Bible that was like not so much on the morality and more on identity and who God says we are. And once I started pulling at that thread of like, well, if I get to choose, here's what I would have. One thing after another, I finally was like, well, maybe I'll just do it myself. And so that's how we got to the Kickstarter part of our story. But in order to make the book, I needed an illustrator, and I had been searching around. I was reading Scott Erickson's Honest Advent at the time. It was Christmas time. And I was like, maybe I'll get a Christmas miracle. So I emailed Scott. I didn't know Scott at the time. Cold emailed him out of nowhere, just sort of gave him this idea I had. I had the 5 Fearless Sisters chapter already done as sort of a proof of concept. And he, to my surprise, now that I know him, I'm like, oh yeah. He emailed back right away, was like, I love this idea, but I'm actually already working on a book. And children's books aren't really my thing anyways, but I really think you should meet my friend Rachel. I think that you guys would really hit it off. So then he introduced Rachel and I over email, and I will let her pick up there.
Yeah, the rest is history. Yeah, Scott is a generous internet friend. I reached out to him, I don't know, a year before, when I was going through massive deconstruction, like everyone else, really appreciating his content. And I'd see stuff about his Say Yes show. I think he maybe had downloads available of it. And I emailed, I was like, how do I get my hands on the show? And just, I don't know, word vomited on him, saying like, I'm an artist and I'm going through this with my church and kind of leaving a house church and sort of undercover and feelings. And she was so generous with me and got back to me and gave me a link, and we emailed back and forth some. We met in person a few times and just kind of became friends. So then when he sent Mari my way, I was like, okay, this is vetted. Like, it's Scott. So that's helpful. Because I get a lot of asks from churches, having a background in being part of a church. And I was kind of going through this process of filtering a lot of that. I'm in the South, and if the church was asking for me to do already like reduced price work, I was like, hey, like I have pretty strict standards about that now. Like, what's your statement of marriage, faith? Like, what's your deal? Okay, sorry, I only work with affirming churches, like, or I'm just not working with churches right now. There was a lot of that kind of filtering happening. And so I did that process with Mari real fast. I was like, hi, just so you know, like, I'm not really currently calling myself a Christian, and I'm ex-evangelical is like a great word for it. I don't believe in biblical inerrancy. I'm LGBTQ affirming. If any of these are like red flags for you, then I'm probably not the right illustrator for you. Thinking that this was probably going to filter Mari out. And then I got an email back from her, which I need to go look at it. But in my mind, like now being in text and emails with Mari like all day, all the time, I just imagine all caps, like, oh my gosh, and that was like a big thumbs up from both of us. Like, oh, okay, we were about to go test the waters in the same way with each other. And yeah, and then we got on a call. It was a great fit. Mari caught me at the right time, and we talk about this sort of like this feeling of what was moving, what was going on in the world. I felt like I had a few years of processing. I feel like I'm the poster child for ex-evangelical toxic positivity and recovery, Enneagram 7, figuring out how to grieve, like all this stuff. ADHD or like that's my world. And I was kind of online practicing being vulnerable and drawing and illustrating around that. But I had to take a long break from scripture, especially after I left my church after a long sort of push trying to change some of our policies. And right as I was starting to feel the itch to be like, what if I like engage with these stories again? Like no pressure. Like just like what if I did some drawing around this? And then that email I had from Mari, I made the right time. I was doing precisely the sort of work that I wanted to do. I mean, at the beginning, I was like I was like, whoa, what if we do it all gender bent? What if Moses was a woman? Like I was just like up real high in the sky. And then we circled back and found what we really wanted to do together. But yeah, it was really beautiful. The rest is history.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so cool. And Scott was on the show
Love Scott.
talking about Honest Advent when that came out.
You're right.
So I'm really curious about the stories that you're getting now. Now that the book's been out in the wild and sold out its first and second and third print runs, and you're getting reviews, some of which are weird and most of which I'm sure are lovely. How's it landing with people? How many other little girls are now hearing a better story? And like boys, like let's just say, how many humans are now hearing a better story?
I think the thing that just really tickles both of us is that the vast majority of the messages we're getting are adults saying, I bought this for a kid in my life and then I kept it because and now it's mine. And it's like we've joked that if we could make a word cloud of all of these messages that we've received, by far the largest word would be sobbing or crying or tears. There's this sort of collective weeping that everyone seems to be doing, and it seems to be like a happy sad. It seems to be people are having this experience of, and I've experienced it too, not through our book, but I guess through the process of writing it, of this really deep grief for the younger version of themselves who didn't have this book or who was hurt or harmed by a book very different from ours. Grieving that they didn't have this resource that they need, but then also celebrating that it's in their life now, and that this little person, whoever it is that they originally bought it for, now has access to something that feels safe. And I think it's like a lot of people feeling like their inner child sort of just like release some tension and release some terror and some grief, and to realize like, oh, this might not be like, we're not claiming to be the end all be all. We're not claiming to be like the very last Star Bible that will ever be written, but it's like, I think people are feeling like, oh, it's a safe place for me to kind of curl up and just be before I decide what my next step is. Because I think a lot of people that we're hearing from are like, I have been stuck. Like I've been in this place where I know I didn't want this thing that I had, and I didn't want it for kids that I love, whether it's the kids in their life or the kids in their heart. We say, I know I didn't want this thing, but I wasn't quite sure where to go, and I still don't know where to go. But I recognize that there needs to be some sort of nourishment for me to continue on the journey, and I can't eat in a state of terror, and I can't nourish myself in a place where there has been trauma. So to sit in stories that don't have those triggers, and in fact some of them to have the opposite of triggers, to have those glimmers in them that are nourishing people and that are moving them towards an experience of love and belonging, it seems to bring us all to tears. And I think that, you know, Rachel and I have had so many conversations about like, we just feel surprised but also thrilled that we get to be a part of that nourishment. I don't think either of us saw that coming. I think we thought like, we're going to make a cute, beautiful, not just cute. We want to make something that's really beautiful for families to use and for kids to enjoy. And I don't think that either of us really saw it coming that it would be something that adults, almost exclusively adults, it seems, are
Mm.
are using consistently in their spiritual practice. That's been really cool. I don't know, Rachel.
That was a secret hope of mine. I mean, it's in my, I'm like, when I put my dedication, like I
Mhm.
dedicated it to my little son, Finn, but I ended up thinking most especially, but also for other kids and their grown-ups, and most especially for the in-betweeners, lost sheep and wandering ones, we all belong. And I think even when we were kind of having this partnership, I felt like I was representing the faction of people who felt like they had to leave or left behind or hurt or disappointed, or like they couldn't, these stories weren't for them anymore. And I was kind of like, whoa, no pressure. You never have to return to this. Like I talk about like the scriptures being like, this was my first language. It's like the language that I learned first. And so it's the most natural to me. But you can learn to love and enjoy and hear stories in other language. That's totally fine. For some people, they're like, I can never go back to that first language. Like, I'm just going to be happier moving on for something else. But yeah, I think that was really humbling to me, and was a hope of mine, was that like the process would be as healing for other people as it was for me just working on the book. That was a delightful thing. I think part of what surprised me, Mari, is how many people I wouldn't have pegged as being in our target market who, quote unquote, like, as a lot of my friends, I feel like on my Instagram, like the people who knew me from church and then the people I met after. I mean, a lot of people in the after space who bought the book and are reading it to their kids. I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, you're not even Christian. They're like, yeah, we love it. Like, this is part of our culture. Like, that's been really humbling. And I think Mara and I were also raced for a lot more vitriol. I think we had a lot of pushback in the beginning, and that was a huge thing that we had to sort of battle. We had some like interior sort of battles with our editorial team, things shifting, like stuff we had to like go back and say like, no, these are like theological choices that we believe in. And I think we were prepared for more people to like call us heretical she-witches, like. And instead, I was
And
like,
they're both women, right?
and they're
Exactly.
right. And Mara and I
Not even a
thinking,
man amongst them.
yeah, and Mara and I thinking we're like doing this like insane progressive thing, and then it's like not quite so famous, but I was just writing down like, did we kind of make Inside Out? Like Inside Out is like a very progressive, beautiful take on like gentle parenting and emotional health, like all the stuff in like conservative parents, and like everyone loves Inside Out, like everyone's on the same page. And that's kind of what's happened. Like I wasn't expecting some of my conservative friends and family to be like, love it. And like for it to be meaningful for a lot of different people. And especially because I think Mara and I were really, our big thing we said the whole time was like, this doesn't need to be everybody's Bible. Like the people that we're worried about pissing off already have like 900 Bibles. Like they're fine. They're being served. Like if they feel attacked by this, they have other things to work on, you know, like it's not your bread. Like you said, like if you don't like our bread, it's fine. There's lots of other bread in the bakery. So that was a sweet thing too. I was like, what are all my sweet non-Christian friends doing? Like what I'm like having to sort of explain the project to them. Like, well, within the context of Christianity, like there's some people who are more progressive, like this has been happening. And they're like, oh yeah, we're down. And I think I've talked to people about that too. Like, but some of this theology is just like part of culture. And it is really healing to hear a different take on the Genesis story, period. Like we're in Western culture. And that's been really cool. So thanks, Maury, for doing all that research for us.
It is incredibly beautiful. I love the language of it was almost like my first language. Being somebody who had a first language who didn't use that a lot and then have now come back more to it. That you said it and I was like, oh, that makes so much sense about even how I engage with scripture. Because similarly, there was a significant period of time where I'm like, I can't. Scripture is triggering that it has been put before me. And so it was something I wasn't able to use in my own practices. But now there was a similar journey of my own. I think I have a desire for something again that reminded me a beautiful time, or what I envisioned to be a beautiful time. So like the idea of it being a first language and something that kind of lived in your subconscious, and being in a Western context, so many of us have these stories that play into our judicial system, to play into our educational system, our medical system. So to hear redemptive language on it is so profound. And Jonathan and I have talked about this a lot, where on both, like on every side of the aisle, I think there are people who desire to love well. And if you were to really push some of their theological convictions, it doesn't always line up with how they love. It's like,
Absolutely.
right? We see that with so many people. And so it makes sense, perfect sense to me, that people on both sides would be like, oh yeah, actually, this is beautiful. Because when you actually have to sit down and think of what you want to give your children, you want to give them the most beautiful, loving imagery of God, and I love how so much of your focus was on your, like, how we hear God's identity, or we hear what God says about our identity, because isn't that what parents want to give their children, just this beautiful image of who they are? So yeah, no, that just sits to me to be really profound, that people on both sides, or all sides of the aisle, are really like enjoying it. So then you both alluded to this. It's interesting to see that, like, this book has come into the world at the right moment in time. And it's like like the project landed on your hearts in the right moment in time. But what's been the journey for you in writing it, in releasing it? What has that shifted your philosophical, theological values? Like what does that look like for you?
How has this labor process rearranged your organs?
Yes.
Really do go in new places.
It's close to home, yeah. I think for me, it's been, so my background, I was raised in a fundamentalist denomination. And so a lot of the Book of Belonging for me is like, a lot of it is me writing what I needed to hear when I was younger. That, like, I was a spicy little, like, curious, question asking, like, relentlessly challenging what was handed to me girl in a fundamentalist denomination. Like, there just wasn't really a place for me. Like, I feel like the church rejected me before I could reject it. Like, my deconstruction journey is different from a lot of my peers in that way, that I didn't have that sort of like cozy church youth group situation that then later I was like, ah, shucks, like I have to let go of that and grieve it. Like, I just, like, there wasn't a place for me from the jump. And so I think to write these stories, and to write what, like, I really like what my inner child needed to hear when I was younger, and that I have said to myself and said to my kids so many times in this, like, sort of desperate attempt, almost like fake it till you make it kind of parenting, of like, I'm going to say this thing that I'm pretty sure is true and I really hope is true. It's the most hopeful and benevolent thing I can think to say. So I'm going to go ahead and chalk that up as like something that God would say, if my human brain can make it that way. And it's, writing the book has been this process of spirit meeting me there and being like, yeah, like, the reason that feels so good is because it is so good. And the reason that these names ring so true is because they are true. And the reason that other stuff didn't sit well with you is because it's harmful. The reason that exclusionary theology feels icky is because it's not the way of Jesus. Like, I think that for me has been such a affirming process for, like, that, that spicy little girl in me who was like, I had things to say and no one really wanted to hear it, to be like, yes. But also, I think even as a parent, like, this process of adulting for me, as I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, looking for the adultier adult, and then being like, shit, that's me. Like, sorry to swear on the record, but I'm guessing it's a show I can do that. Yeah, to just be like, oh, I'm that adult. But then to be met there with like, yeah, you are, and you're not just winging it, I think has been really lovely, and really just, so in line with who I just was like hoping that God was, and just sort of assuming until I was proven otherwise. that God was. So for me, it was almost like Rachel has joked that like this whole book has been this process of us building the plane as we fly it. And I feel like for me, it was like the not only the plane of this book, but the plane of like my sense of self in light of who God says I am. Like all these things, I'm like, God says this about you kids. I'm like, about me too, though, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so it's just been like it's been affirming. I think that's the best word for it. It's just like hoping that I belonged in this place. Ironically, this place of carving out belonging for others and declaring it to be true, hoping that I also belonged, and then being met there with like this overwhelming me too from a community that I admire and cherish so dearly has been really lovely.
That's fantastic.
Beautiful.
I've loved watching for Mari. Like, it was cool. And Mari was a mom before I was a mom. So we became best friends. And she also was able to like mentor me and help me through so much mom stuff. But I think the beautiful thing that she's modeled, and I love watching her grow in, is like from the beginning of the project being like, "Ooh, like, please, like, would you like this?" Like all these publishers, when we were having to go through these processes of like, you don't need to pitch to them. They're excited to talk to you. Like, you don't need to squeeze and change yourself to make like, to see her grow in her confidence of like, at I don't know, a few months ago, preaching, right? Like just speaking in front of a huge room of people with authority in front of her girls and like something that would have felt so maybe alien, but affirmative to her as a little girl. One thing I think Mari's done great modeling for me is like she said, the winging it, even as a parent. Like, I'm modeling this for you, even though if it's not natural to me, like, even if this is hard for me, it's what I want to be true for you. And so we're going to do it. Like, and I feel like that was the writing she led with and the practices that she pushed. Like, we grown-ups have our own trauma and stuff, and we're limping and we're trying to lead the way, say, here's how you can dance, and we can teach them the steps and say, like, I think this is how it goes. It feels right in my gut so that our kids can actually get there. And I've loved that, watching Mari go through that process. And I think that's how she wrote the book. And it was helpful for me as a parent too.
I'm hearing so much in this conversation around trusting our body as a filter of goodness. And sometimes the only authority we have to trust that our body as a filter of goodness is hope. There's no other authority than hope. And try, like, again, we were on this last episode, this thing of like, we treat it like some kind of radical thing to trust your gut, to trust your body. Again, obviously, with different stories coming from different traditions. I came from this very, very charismatic tradition that was, on the one hand, like, listen to the Holy Spirit. God is real. God is experienceable. You can listen to God. You can use your body in exuberant praise and worship, but your emotions are probably evil. And there was like these weird dichotomous things that I remember at like 16, at 15, I was like, okay, that's what the man said. But by 17, I was like, that's bullshit. and by 18, I was out the door. And so, my wife and I rolled through deconstruction a decade before the zeitgeist, and our kids are a little older, and I mean, our eldest is 16, and I remember sitting with, okay, first of all, I remember the one time that I ever spanked him. This is now 12 years ago. And he turned around and slapped me in the face. And
sounds accurate.
And I couldn't justify why my hitting was okay and his hitting was not okay. And so I went upstairs and I said, honey, this has to be added to the list of things that doesn't work, that we were told works. The list of the pile is big. But, we had nothing. At that point, we didn't have Dan Siegel. We didn't have the whole brain child. We didn't have interpersonal neurobiology. I mean, it was just coming out. But we had nothing more than our body going, this is icky. and a sense of hope that God, that love, that goodness must be better than we can imagine it to be. I mean, which is literally a scriptural phrase. if you can figure out this, how much more does the Father? And so I'm just so intrigued at that, hearing it in your two journeys, hearing that in the way people are reacting to the book, knowing that Tri and I have been sitting here for the last month or so, kind of in this space of, what if we all spend the next decade trusting our bodies in a way that, like, the church hasn't and the world hasn't? And I think the other thing that is just resonating in my spirit and mind and whatever is, okay, there's two things, and they're going to sound unrelated, but they're related. One, Rob Bell, a year or two ago, someone had asked him in an interview, do you still call yourself a Christian? And he kind of pauses for a minute, and then he's like, for some time I didn't, because that word had been so dragged through the mud and so made to be this thing by these other people. And then I decided those other people don't get to decide what it is. So fuck yeah, I am a Christian. and that rang true for me. I was like, there it is. Okay. I probably decided that, which is usually my relationship to Rob Bell. He puts into words things I have recently come to land at. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. They don't get to decide what this means. And so I think the metaphysical thing that I just can't escape around this, and you can get there with a question. If there was originally, before time, before creation, if there's just God, which is to say, the perichoretic love poured between Father, Son, and Spirit, if there's just a dance of selfless, othering energy, and this selfless, othering energy seeks to create a physical cosmos, where do they do it? Inside themselves or outside themselves? And it seems to me that inside themselves is the only conceivable option. So we've all been drilled into inviting Jesus into our heart. And my point of reference has been shifting to simply recognizing that all of created anything is inside Jesus's heart. And if that's the case, well, then of course we should be trusting our bodies. We should be trusting the very resonance of the cosmos itself, because God holds it all. And so of course we're going to stumble into goodness. Of course we're going to write a book that we only have kind of a glimpse of, and like you said, glimmers of, and while we're walking out our pain and our confusion, like, even that is pushing back against patriarchy, right? And I feel this moment by moment where I'm like, oh, I don't have this figured out yet. I don't have this completely wrestled to the ground, and I don't have an authoritative credential to put this out into the world. And I'm like, oh, right. Okay, so that whole thinking is part of the problem.
Yes,
let's do research. Yes, let's not have people spouting about stuff they truly don't know. But you followed the only authority that needed to be followed.
Yeah.
And produced something that resonated in the way the Spirit's resonating in the cosmos at this time with so many people. And even what you said about, like, Rachel, about, like, your non-believing friends, like, which is a horrible term anyway, but, like, these people, these other people, why are they reading this book? We're having those kinds of conversations all the time with people now. And, folks who have no seeming interest or upbringing in the church are like, yeah, absolutely, tell me about your source of hope and dignity. Yeah, like, and how are you raising your children to be kind and other-facing humans? Is there Bible stories that could help in that? And again, 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh, definitely don't pick up a Bible. But today, it's like, yeah, there are some really interesting and redemptive stories about love's work among humans, and that's synonymous with God's work among humans, and so on and so forth. I know that I probably went really woo-woo on that, but
No, I was
all of that
tracking.
ties together and where I'm at this moment.
I love that. I feel like Rachel and I have talked so often about how so much of the it's not correcting, but so much of the like editing that we're doing with the Book of Belonging, or like sort of reimagining, we would not have to do if it was not a part of Western Christianity to deny your physicality. And how if all of us in youth group were not taught that your heart is deceitful above all else, and that like even that we use the term intuition, I feel like is probably considered heretical in so many circles, which is so silly when you think about the idea of an of Christ incarnate, right? Like if that's significant for God to take on flesh, then then why are we treating this flesh like this, like sort of like meat sack that we just like, you know, wobble around in and just do our best until we get to escape it. And I think that's some of the redemptive work that Rachel has done with the illustrations that I'm so grateful for, is honoring physicality in so many different forms, and also honoring our bodies as the beloved home of our emotions. I think she does a really incredible job showing human emotion on characters' faces, and then on Jesus's face. Like that has been huge. People like, oh, I saw Jesus doing something other than like a smize, like a gentle smize. I think that it's just been really cool for me to watch Rachel process through that.
Yeah, the imagery's been amazing. It's interesting. I'm like I'm having trouble getting words out in this conversation because there's so many beautiful things happening. I'm a little flooded where I'm like, oh my goodness, like every big thing in my life is converging in this moment. And it's beautiful. And so I'm really just grateful for both of you and for what you're putting out. And just even as you're talking, little Try is freaking out because she's like, this is what she would have wanted as a kid. And so, but when you talk even about like, there's so much that's been said. But I'm so struck again, like even Jonathan, when you're talking about like, so see, I can't get words out. I'm like, oh, my brain is, I also don't know if it's like perimenopause. I would like to pretend that it's not, but here we go. This conversation started with Rachel, you talking about feeling like you didn't know if what you were putting out was good, and it didn't just flow. And then Mariko, you were talking about how, you know, you felt like you were just putting this, like the plates in the cupboard and you were finishing the project. Like you just got to join in at the end. And it was fantastic. And in some sense there was flow, but at the same time, sorry, my family's having its own little meltdown. But at the same time, you were also looking behind you for the other adult in the room. And I think so much of that part of denying our physicality and that we've been given from the generations before us has been everything has to be black and white. And so the adult in the room has a specific answer that is yes or is no. This is right. This is wrong. And what you both have given us, even in your process, is there's no one right process. One of you felt like it was trudging in mud, and the other of you like just felt like you were just putting the plates in the shelf and you were done, right? Like, and I'm sure every moment was different, but the process is not the same for everyone. Following our intuition and our creative source, which I believe is Holy Spirit, is not the same for everyone. However we identify that, whatever that source of love is, it doesn't have to look the same. And even so, when you depicted the images, like I even look at the opening creations scenes, and I'm like, there's so much left for interpretation. And I love that. I love even some of the genderless moments. I love that there is emotion given, and then there's also stuff left for you to decipher on your own. Because even as my kids are currently not, I don't read stage of their life. And so I read out loud in their presence and annoy them. And so I was reading so I'm like, this is such a beautiful theological framework, and even how the gem works, and you turn it and you ask questions. And so it kind of turned into a conversation of everything you take in your life, you get to ask, like, what am I taking from it? What's my perspective? What am I seeing? What am I seeing about what I'm reading? What am I seeing about myself? And it is going to be different for everybody based on our lived experience. So even when you said, Mariko, this is not the be all and end all, of course not. Like, there are going to be so many more lived experiences beyond us. But for right now, this is so much more inclusive to all of us that have not seen themselves depicted or represented for years, or have not seen the people they love represented, and have not seen the Jesus they love represented, right? Like when you talk about, like, you had this, like, this vision of hope that you wanted, like that was your guide, like that was your North Star, that's your guiding principle. I'm like, oh yeah, we all hoped to be loved. We were all like, oh yeah, okay, maybe I'm doing well enough. Maybe I'm going to make it to this like evangelical heaven. Like, hopefully I'm going to be in the good place. And to then align with Holy Spirit and be like, oh, actually you're like, you are in a good place and I see you as good. Like, really, like, it just, oh, it's beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. And I know you both talk about just a lot, like aligning with what the Holy Spirit's doing. But the thing is, it's also very courageous of you to step into this in this moment. You could have said no. And the fact that you did feels, yeah, it feels really profound, and I'm really grateful. Not even for my children, but for me. And that's Jonathan. I don't like a lot of Christian things right now. I don't like a lot of things right now.
She doesn't. Mariko, what's happening?
I think it's just that sort of continual affirmation. Just that, we did the thing and it was good. It's hard for me to trust that. Sometimes I joke that I have a scandalized fundamentalist who sits on my shoulder at any given moment. And to hear that this thing that we did and this way we felt led, it's not hard for me to trust spirit. Like, I've had enough experience with God. That's not, it's trusting myself that it is the challenge for me. And yeah, like we were talking about, the creative work was not hard for me. Writing the stories was not hard. That is so fun. And it like very flowy for me. The thing that gets in my way is not believing that I'm the girl for the job. And but it also, like, it feels so fitting to be the girl for the job, specifically because I am not qualified in all of the ways that our capitalistic, patriarchic, Western system of religion would qualify me. When I sit and think about the fact that two women in their, like, childbearing years created this thing and are participating in this movement, that feels very fitting to me. If it was someone that wasn't me, I think I'd be like, hell yeah, of course. But because it is me, it's just really emotional for you to acknowledge that and affirm that, and for that affirmation to come from two people that I admire and see resonating with so much of the wisdom that I have experienced and enjoyed. It's just it's a happy sad.
Thank you for sharing it with us.
Yeah. But yes, you both did the damn thing. And it's like, it is, I know, I'm sorry, I've talked about this so much, but it's like, it is so the moment, because yes, it's for the kids, but you're reparenting all of us in the process. Like, it had to be you.
That's a key word, though. Yeah. I feel like another thing that we just sort of joined in on was this sort of like, so many of us are in therapy doing reparenting work, whether it's through, or Jonathan, you're into internal family systems. That's something we've talked about, like doing that work of like talking to our younger parts and connecting with our core self, or like the self that interfaces with the divine. so much of us are doing that work and speaking so gently and kindly to the younger versions of ourselves, and speaking so gently and kindly to our own children. And even like so many of us I know are Dr. Becky fans of doing this sort of like gentle or conscious parenting, and saying to my kids when I was writing this book, to be able to say to my kids, like, you are not a bad kid, you are a good kid who is having a hard time. If that is true for my kids in their worst moments, isn't that true for me as well? And if that's true, then what do I do with this theology that says that I'm desperately wicked and totally depraved down to the very core of me?
Yeah.
And what do I do when my secular therapist and in my secular understanding of how child development and neuroplasticity, how all of that works, if that isn't aligning with with what scripture tells me is true, then what do I do with that? I think so many of us are at that crossroads.
Yeah.
And then feeling the truth, feeling like it's too good to be true, but then it is. That's such a wonderful and heartbreaking experience that I think so many people have been relating to through our work. And that feels it feels really scary, but really honoring to do that work.
Yeah. Scary and honoring. I think is the path in terms of our relationship to ourselves. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, even as you're reflecting on the scandalized fundamentalist on your shoulder, and it's like, what do we do with these? And I know the right answer in progressive social media spaces is to rage at them and call out and subtweet all of their errors.
Yes.
And I'm going, yeah, but internally, I need to say, hey, friend.
Yeah. You're a part of me. Yeah.
Thank you for keeping me safe from eternal conscious torment.
Yes.
That would be a terrible outcome.
Yeah.
And you don't want me to have that outcome. And so I can honor and courage. I can see that as an act of love for me. That is, you are giving me a gift of not suffering forever.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now what if?
Yes, exactly. And I don't think that I quite connected that at first. Actually, Rachel was one of the first people to explain that dynamic to me, in that we got I think you were present for this, Jonathan. We got trolled pretty hard really early on in the Kickstarter process, before we had signed our book deal, before any of that was happening. A well-known conservative mega church pastor sort of put out the alert on our book and sort of flooded our DMs and our comments with just really hateful, racist, sexist stuff. And I was telling Rachel, like, I just don't understand the vitriol. I don't understand the hatred. Like, if you don't like what I'm doing, just don't look at it. Like, why? And Rachel was the first person to say, like, it's fear. I don't think you understand that it's fear. Like, you are sort of poking at the foundation of their understanding of their eternal destination, their eternal, like, if that's really what's at the core, if you've been told that if you don't align with this, like, certain, if you don't have this cognitive assent to this one really specific, like, manifesto, then you're gonna burn forever. Anyone who's like poking at that, like, of course, like, we're all at our worst when we're afraid or ashamed. And so I think, Rachel, you were the first person to be like, it's fear. Do you get that? And I was like, oh, yes. And I mean, she had experienced that. I think the reason you got that, Rachel, was because you had experienced it in person in a way that I had only understood on the internet. And so she had, like, literally lived that experience, and it showed up for me. And in retrospect, I'm like, that was really courageous of you, Rachel, I think, to like take this traumatic experience and be like, let me coach you through this.
Thank you for sharing all of this, for being so vulnerable with us. And this has been rich. Can we ask if either or both of you would pray for us, and all of us, whoever us is?
I would say, as I'm right now, if there was a prayer that it would probably be something a little more liturgical that was written down. And I can like only remember the breastplate of St. Patrick, right?
You said that like we would all know what that is. Does everyone else know what that is?
Okay.
Okay.
No,
I'm not going to recite it perfectly,
not
but
this.
so I think when I was like
That's okay.
parting ways with evangelicalism, like we talk about that being my first language, and then I went and became an expat. I moved to Paris, and I learned a new language, and it felt so good. I, like many evangelicals, found a lot of beauty in liturgy, and suddenly not feeling the pressure to have this quiet time with these extemporaneous, ecstatic moments with God all the time, and just so a prayer that I really love that's a really great to do when you're walking is the breastplate of St. Patrick. And there's a long list of things. But it's wow, okay. Christ above me, Christ below me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ on my left hand, Christ on my right hand, Christ when I lie down, Christ when I sit down, Christ when I'm waking, Christ while I'm sleeping, Christ all around me, Christ inside me. Amen.
It's really,
There's a longer
thank
list of
you.
places where Christ is that
really,
I can't remember, but it's pretty great. You can kind of just, you can say Christ in that tree over there.
I love
And
it.
it's funny that came to mind because I think I like reconnected with this idea of Christ recently, but still is a touchier one for me. I think this idea of love or God, big all caps G God is a little easier for me at the moment. So it's really sweet that Christ popped up.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing
Absolutely.
that.
And on my end, in place of a prayer, I actually had, if I'm allowed to do this quote that I taped it to my computer, and I've just been reading it all day. Someone that I was emailing with randomly had it in the signature of their email, and I asked her where she got it from because I was so moved by it. And she said, I don't know, I heard it, I don't know, in a sermon one time or something, and I haven't been able to place it. So let me know if you find out where it's from. So I'd like to read that if that's okay. It says, biologically, adults produce children. Spiritually, children produce adults. Most of us have not grown up until we have helped children to do so. Thus do generations form a braided cord. And I have not gotten over that yet. I've been staring at it all day, just thinking about the work that Rachel and I get to do, and this resounding Me Too that we've been met with from people everywhere. And I think it just sort of gets at what a lot of us are experiencing, like this like parenting and reparenting and caring for the younger versions of ourselves, but while also grieving and celebrating, and just that idea of this braided cord that we all get to be a part of. And I think it's the intentionality and the purpose of it that feels really lovely and redemptive for me, that like even in this like sort of painful, confusing, deconstructing, reconstructing, reimagining situation that so many of us find ourselves in, this idea of like it being this cord that I imagine goes back through generations and goes on ahead of us, that we continue to participate in, that this is the way it's supposed to be, is really comforting and beautiful for me. That none of it is outside of, like you said, that the heart, instead of inviting Jesus into our heart, that we're all participating in this cord braiding activity within the heart of true belonging and of love, is just so comforting to me, that this is what we're supposed to do.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful. Thank you both so much. Wow.